Green hydrogen, as we all know, is produced from renewable energy sources using electrolysis, ensuring zero carbon dioxide emission. India has approved the National Green Hydrogen Mission in January 2022 with an aim to produce 5 million metric tons of green hydrogen every year by 2030, with an associated renewable energy capacity addition of 125 gigawatts. This morning, here at the Conclave, Power Minister R.K. Singh said that India already has a capacity of 7.8 million tons of green hydrogen, at least the commitments are there. So what is the potential of the country to tap this opportunity, and how can we accelerate the change? So joining us to deliberate is this stellar panel that we have here. Let me start off with Mr. Derek M. Shah, who is the Senior Vice President and Head of the Green Manufacturing and Development, Larsen & Toubro. You have noticed how grandiose plans that India has as far as the green hydrogen initiative is concerned. How achievable are our goals that we have set for ourselves? And how do companies like yours come into the picture? Because you have already announced your own partnership in this area, and you are going ahead with your commitments. If you can elaborate on that.
You are absolutely right when you said in your opening remark about the efforts of our country towards decarbonization, where the cabinet chaired by our Honorable Prime Minister laid out the roadmap for the green hydrogen mission. And as you rightly said, the green hydrogen mission actually lays out for the country to do at least 5 million tons of green hydrogen by 2030. So rather than only looking at what are these achievables, I would little bit broad base it, saying that India right now already generates grey hydrogen to the extent about 5 to 6 million, and by 2030 it will be about 12 million. So in our efforts to decarbonize, we would like to reduce the dependence on grey and go to green hydrogen by at least 5 million tons. That is around more than 40-41% attempt is to make it green hydrogen. This will be a huge effort towards the reduction of carbon dioxide. Your question is how much is it achievable? I think a large part of it is definitely achievable, given the thrust the government is giving, the corporates are giving, to also kind of enhance and reiterate it to what L&T is doing in this. So, L&T realized long back that the reliance on fossil fuels, because our large part of our portfolio, business portfolio lies in the energy sector. So we knew that there was going to be a shift away from fossil fuels. So we focused on the green energy sector. And we have laid out a plan to capture the entire value chain across the green hydrogen. So L&T is looking at manufacturing of electrolyzers. L&T has already entered into a license agreement with a very reputed French company called McPhy. We are rolling out our electrolyzers by end of this year, in another 1 month's time. And going forward, we will scale that capacity to more than 1 gigawatt a year, which is very, very substantial. Beyond the manufacturing of electrolyzers, we are already setting up green hydrogen plants. We have set up a small green hydrogen plant at a factory in Hazira, where we produce absolutely green, that means out of rooftop solar. We use the clean and green power. We use electrolysis, the electrolyzer, to split water. And we use the hydrogen and blend it with the natural gas, which we are using it into our furnaces in our factory. So we don't only speak, we don't only make presentations, we walk the talk. We were one of the first companies in India to say that here is a plant, and here is how it works, and here is clean and green hydrogen. And what we are doing it within our own factory, we'll do it across the country, across multiple sectors. So that's part two. we are already working with multiple corporates to deal with this. And the third part is naturally, as a part of this green hydrogen mission, the program of the government, which is called SIGHT, S-I-G-H-T, whether it's something like a PLI scheme, whether today is the submission date of the tender, which is gone, where multiple corporates are going to bid to set up green hydrogen plants in India. L&T along with its partners are also bidding. So this will enable multiple corporates to, as Mr. Singh was saying, that there are huge commitments already on play, and these commitments will be kind of evidenced in the manner in these tenders of SIGHT, and you'll see multiple bids, multiple investments, projects, all of them coming out in the country in the very near future. So I think this is as far as the domestic is concerned, because we are on Indo-Japan, and I also heard the earlier speakers speak about what are we doing with respect to the other countries. Yeah. I think it's very important to also bring to light, while we have our national green hydrogen mission, which actually captures what we want to do within the country for our own domestic use, a large part of this commitment is also directed towards exports of green hydrogen. And Japan plays a very, very important, I would say, role in this entire commitment and our relationship, because Japan is one of the large countries which is actually come out with very clear signals as to where they are going to use green ammonia. There are multiple Japanese companies who are not only talking to L&T, they are talking to multiple other companies in India to set up these green hydrogen, green ammonia plants, which will be produced in India, shipped across to countries like Japan, and obviously there are other countries like Singapore, South Korea, where they will be utilized, and these will replace fossil fuels and partly other elements in the industry to help decarbonize these countries. So Indian corporates are playing a major role in the production of green hydrogen, in enhancement of this green energy, reduction of carbon, and decarbonization across the country, across the globe also.
Excellent. In fact, let us take a step back and try to understand why green energy, green hydrogen, for instance, is extremely imperative for the country and for Indian business. And I have two experts who can throw light on this. We have Mr. Ramnath Vaidyanathan. He is the Associate Vice President of Sustainability at Godrej Industries. I'll come first to you, and then we'll go to Ms. Rita Roy Chaudhary. ESG is no longer something that is, it's come to the forefront in a big way. In the boardrooms, it is being talked about in a big way. At the same time, there is a lot of questions that are still asked about, the economic viability of, something like this. So how do companies balance out, on the one side, how do you ensure that we do align ourselves with, whatever is going across the globe in terms of the green energy thrust, but at the same time ensure that, we also meet our economic targets?
Thank you for that question. Because I get asked this question a lot about the viability of ESG and what does it mean from an economic perspective. I'm going to answer this in 2-3 different perspectives. The first being that let's look at pure mathematics and pure stock market valuations. Now, the Dow Jones Sustainability Index, which is a well-known global index, measures the performance of ESG-focused companies on their stock price performance versus the regular index, which is all companies. Over the last 15 years, the companies which have been strong on ESG have outperformed the index continuously, and the gap is growing. So for people who are interested in facts and they say, forget anecdotes, show me facts, the facts are there. Purely from a fact perspective, a numbers perspective, companies with strong ESG principles outperform financially companies with poor ESG principles. And if you look a little deeper into it, you'll understand why. Being strong on ESG is basically a de-risking. You're de-risking yourself for a future which is very uncertain when it comes to climate. So investors are more looking for companies which are really not even just looking at a risk, but looking at opportunities. Now, that change in mindset is what is really being driven in this decade. Looking at ESG as a risk, which was I would say the primary driver of a lot of ESG work over the last decade, saying that how do I protect myself from a future increase in fossil fuel energy prices? How do I protect myself from water crisis by really becoming better in the way I consume water? To now looking at how do I cater to a market that is looking for more ESG first solutions? How do I cater to a consumer who's looking for a low plastic solution? So that entire shift from risk to opportunity is really what is driving it at the board level, like what you mentioned earlier. And it purely just makes economic sense. I mean, so I think where we get a little lost in this is that we use the same old time-honored time windows of 3 to 5 years to see paybacks. Whereas ESG and risk is a thing you need to look at slightly macro perspective. You need to step back a little and take a 10, 15-year window perspective. Now, I understand a lot of boards and a lot of shareholders do not have that patience, and they're not looking at 10 to 15-year windows, which is why it's very important to create a roadmap which shows short-term wins, medium-term wins, and then long-term wins. You need to be able to buy yourself time to really achieve some of the longer-term ones. So creating a very strong roadmap which has short time windows is very important. The reason I mention this, I hear a lot of people talking about net zero 2070, for example. Great ambition, nobody's faulting that. But you don't want to end up in 2055 wondering where we are with respect to achieving it and will we achieve it or not. So it's very important to have shorter time windows, tangible targets, put stepping stone targets and really achieve those. In India, at least, clean energy is one of the cheapest ways to really decarbonize because renewable energy in India is fundamentally cheap. Water is a bigger area of worry because water is priced incorrectly in India. And both of these have a big influence on the hydrogen economy, if you look at it, which is why I think the pricing of hydrogen, which is the only thing that we really need to crack going forward the next few years, and you will see a massive uptake in the consumption of green hydrogen. So we need to look at the entire ecosystem in a holistic perspective and not isolate it as carbon as a separate problem, water as a separate problem, waste as a separate problem. They're all fundamentally interlinked.
Great. Ms. Rita Roy Chaudhary, in your perch as managing partner and chief executive at eCube Investment Advisors, what do you feel are the imperatives and what are some of the challenges that are, that companies are facing when it comes to addressing the issue of green hydrogen?
Thanks, Arun. So I think the imperative is very clear, and Ramnath also mentioned this. The imperative for any form of clean power is very clear. That in our pathway to decarbonize, clean energy is going to play an instrumental, a pivotal role. And looking at India's Panchamrit goals, all of which are where clean power is going to play the most important and significant role, whether it is the 50% energy mix from renewables or 500 gigawatts of non-fossil based energy by 2030, or even the projected carbon emissions reductions from now until 2030 of 1 billion tons, or reducing the carbon intensity of the economy by 45%. All of these and are ultimately the long-term net zero goal. So I think none of it will be will happen unless we are focusing significantly on this energy transition to clean energy. But at the same time, I think what is imperative is that the entire ecosystem develops in a manner, in a holistic manner, so that as we ramp up the supply, we also trigger the demand. And it's not just the question of demand generation. The concomitant challenges that are going to come in terms of the vast infrastructure requirement that production, transportation, storage of hydrogen will require, right? That itself is going to generate a lot of carbon emissions. So how are we going to look at the infrastructure development for green hydrogen so that it doesn't result in another large crisis for us? But coming back to the point of ecosystem development, I think infrastructure is one thing that needs to be really ramped up. It doesn't exist today. So whether it's in terms of creating new infrastructure, expanding the network, retrofitting the existing gas infrastructure, all of that I think needs to be focused on. So that's one critical component of the ecosystem. The second component is the supply chain itself. So there are strong concerns around a sustainable supply chain for green hydrogen. And if we are to be completely energy independent by 2047, as the goal has been set, then I think the most important thing to focus on is the sustainability of the supply chain for any form of clean power we're talking about, whether it's renewables or hydrogen. And therefore, looking at the critical materials, I think one of the World Bank studies points at the maximum amount of requirement of critical materials which will come for the renewable energy capacity that will have to be expanded in order to meet the hydrogen energy demand, right? So that's going to be a very important aspect. But other than the critical materials, I think even the balance, the BOP equipment, where India has a strong potential to indigenize completely, I think that also has to be ramped up in parallel. So the supply chain ecosystem has to develop as fast or faster as the production of electrolyzers or the production of green hydrogen itself is concerned. The third part of, I think, the ecosystem is really the demand trigger. And, while so there can be aggregation of demand in a regional context, so that kind of obviates the necessity of transporting or storing hydrogen for longer periods or transporting it over longer stretches. So that will bring down the cost of hydrogen, and therefore I think triggering demand at a regional level, and also and aggregating it like you have for power. You have power purchase agreements and power supply agreements, and all of those could be done for hydrogen as well at a regional level. So I think demand triggering will be important, and while the refinery and fertilizer sectors are the first ones where this demand can be channeled because they're already using grey hydrogen which can be replaced. But other sectors like steel, like mobility and cement and others, I think there has to be a gradual adoption plan for these sectors. So demand is the other thing. And the fourth thing, I think the standards and protocols have to be in place. It doesn't exist. So, there are huge safety concerns. So safety protocols and standards, I think, are another important aspect of the ecosystem.
Yeah. So you have very beautifully laid out the some of the premier challenges that are on the way of implementing this. Now I'd like to bring in the representative of the Japan Bank for International Cooperation, Mr. Shinichiro Imahori. And I think as the sole Japanese representative on this panel too, I think you're the best position to bring us give us an idea of how Japan sees the Indian the activities that are happening in the green hydrogen market. Japan has been laying a huge thrust on green energy initiatives and is looking to import a lot of green hydrogen and ammonia from other countries, and India could be a major partner in this. So that's a big opportunity for India. So if you could just highlight the opportunities there.
Okay, thank you very much for introducing, and thank you very much for inviting me in this panel. And please let me touch upon JBIC's introduction first. JBIC is a 100% governmental institution under the Ministry of Finance, and we are expanding our business here. We provided $13 billion loan from the 2020 to 2023, which is very huge. And also, our recent track record is providing a $5 billion loan to AMNSI, ArcelorMittal Nippon Steel India, and also $2 billion to State Bank of India. And our recent focus area is supply chain resilience, including semiconductor and battery and EV, but also renewable sectors, of course, green hydrogen. And I'd like to touch upon Japan's situation. Japan is importing LNG, oil and coal, but we have to achieve a net zero by 2050. And in order to achieve this, gradual transition is required. So that's why the green hydrogen we will import. And Japan's land price is very limited, so we can not so much produce green hydrogen. So Japan, and also in the Far East Asian regions, Korea, also aiming to import the green hydrogen. But Japan is really aiming to import. And when it comes to import, the price is still high compared to the existing fare. So that's why the Japanese government is planning to issue GX economy transition bond, which is 20 trillion yen. This is equivalent to 11 trillion rupee. This is a huge amount. And the Japanese subsidy will be coming from this bond. And now the Japanese government is setting up the criteria for selecting the eligible project in terms of a subsidy. And now the one of the criteria would be the energy security perspective. And from Japan's perspective, we import LNG from the Australia mainly, and also US, Middle East, and South Asian regions. But backed by this strong economical political tie, India is a very prominent, and we see that India would be the very good candidate suppliers place. And also India is very strong in terms of green hydrogen and ammonia. So Japan has been facing a huge price fluctuation of oil and gas, but the green hydrogen price is relatively stable compared to the oil and gas. So this will contribute to stabilize our import price as well. And when we see the India and Japan collaboration, sorry, I would like to talk about India-Japan collaboration. And I think the Japanese trading houses and also utility companies, they can be I believe they can be a key role for exporting projects from India to Japan. Because India's renewable companies already have a huge gigawatt of renewable capacity, and also a strong, excellent capability to deliver the electricity to clients. But this is a domestic production, domestic consumption. And if I were Indian developer side, my competitor for supplying my hydrogen to Japan would be the international oil major and national giant, national companies like Petronas or whatever. So they already know much about Japan's commercial custom, and also marketing. They already have a strong capability to marketing and also operational wise. So the Japanese trading houses and the utility companies have already such expertise, and they can complement to the Indian renewable developers. So I would like to suggest such collaboration between them, and JBIC is really willing to support by using competitive financial tools on that project.
Okay, thank you for that. I think we can have an extension of this perspective from Mr. Abhijit Chatterjee, who is also the general manager with social innovation business with Hitachi India, which is also has been running a very successful kind of relationship with India for a long time now. From your perspective, how do we tap this opportunity? And if you can tell us about the kind of work that Hitachi has been doing, in this the green hydrogen sector.
Sure. Thank you, Arun. So let me just start off with a small bit of information. And we have all been talking about pricing, demand, supply balance. India is actually one among a handful of countries where the cost of green hydrogen will be lower than the cost of grey hydrogen by 2030. So I think that itself provides a lot of opportunity and collaboration between countries like India and Japan. Now, the way to, we've spoken about partnerships and collaboration, and really they are going to be at the essence of any business model where, we will be able to meet the targets that we are looking for in terms of production, in terms of reduction of CO2 emissions through hydrogen. Demand supply is an essential thing to balance. While we are seeing a lot of large hydrogen projects being announced, we also need to look at how many of them are actually bankable, how many of them are actually reaching financial closure. So for that, the demand really has to be sorted out, as Ms. Roy has already pointed out. The other thing is, in terms of collaboration, standardization, and there I think one thing to look forward to is the COP28, where there is going to be, hopefully, there's going to be a launch of intent to collaborate amongst the different countries on standardization, classification. So I think that's going to be announced on the 5th of December. So that's something that we all need to kind of look at, and that will really be a catalyst for international trade. The other thing is, and I'll talk about what Hitachi has been doing in Japan. Japan, of course, the hydrogen story has begun. So we've been working on one particular very interesting project from 2017, actually. This is in a city called Tomiya in the Miyagi prefecture on the east of Japan. I hope I got that right. So there, the task that was given to Hitachi, together with Marubeni, which is one of the leading trading companies in Japan, is to show how an existing supply ecosystem can be used to develop a sustainable hydrogen ecosystem. So there, of course, we started with renewable energy, the electrolysis process to produce green hydrogen that was stored first in buffer tanks. And then, interestingly, the problem was how to distribute this. And together with Marubeni, we were able to, actually design hydrogen cassettes for storage, probably the size of this placard, where, when we used a special alloy that Marubeni was able to source, where then these hydrogen cassettes were able to be distributed to schools and homes with fuel cells for generation of energy, and together with your normal groceries, so bread and milk. So one of the key things is how do you safely distribute hydrogen. So this was a very interesting example, and if I were to draw a comparison, maybe, and look into the future, if we have fuel cells at our homes and offices, we could call up Zomato or Swiggy for a hydrogen cassette. They could come, and so this is something that this was run successfully between 2017 and 2021, and this, I think it's something that everybody can look at and learn, where it's a kind of a successful model of collaboration. And another interesting thing is, so Hitachi has also been collaborated with Toyota for designing of a hydrogen train, which is the first hydrogen train in Japan, which is a hybrid hydrogen and fuel cell plus lithium battery. So, and that is something that we look to commercialize in Japan by 2030 as well. So these are some models of collaboration that can be useful for learning as we embark on the journey in India.
Right, thank you. Mr. Derek Shah, we have seen how speakers have been talking of the fact that whatever is happening in the India so far, as far as the capacities that are being built are fine, but we need to ensure that the markets are tied up and there is enough demand that comes up. That has been a key point which some of the speakers have raised. I would like to have your perspective on this because L&T is already working on this front. And I would also like you to talk about the manufacture of electrolyzers, because that is a big area where India has a huge potential, and I think you have made a head start in that.
Yeah, I think it's one of the most important and pertinent points that was touched upon by a couple of speakers on the demand side. Because on the supply side, as you rightly said, corporates are gearing up. The renewable sector is already, looking at enhancing our both solar, wind, and now pumped storage also. So when all of these are happening and kind of the jigsaw puzzle, all the pieces are falling in place, the big subject is demand. So right now, we are very, I would say, looking forward to mandates being announced by the government. It is on the anvil. We understand that the government is looking at, let's say, defining a particular percentage of blended green hydrogen with gray hydrogen refineries. It could be anywhere between 1% to 2% or 3%, although the earlier estimates were higher. Then going forward, the fertilizer industry will have some mandates in terms of the green ammonia that they import versus how can it be blended with the ammonia that they import can be blended with green ammonia. So the mandates from the government is going to play a very important role in driving this sector. Naturally, the big question is why aren't the mandates coming in place? It's because of the price differential. Right now, we have a gray hydrogen, let's say between $1.8 to $2 or $1.5 to $2, while green could be somewhere in the range of about $4.5 to $5. So there is an arbitrage that has to be bridged, and it comes at a cost. But then we have seen this happening in solar plants. If you go back 15 years back, everybody said solar power is not possible. It comes up upwards of 15 rupees per unit. Had not the government taken such huge, let's say, steps incentivizing solar power plants, bringing in RPOs, renewable power obligations, 15 years later, we see solar power plants coming at 2.5, 3 rupees per kilo. So this happens in any upcoming technology with the hand-holding of the government, incentivizing the sector, drawing up right policy and guidelines and everything. Hydrogen, green hydrogen will also, the price will drop. There are multiple issues on the policy side which is happening, which will take place. So I'm sure, I think I'm very happy to hear about, we are aware of what's happening in Japan in terms of import of green ammonia. We are also in touch with multiple of these companies, utilities and trading houses. And going forward, we look forward to kind of creating them. On the electrolyzer part, I think it's another very important subject that while the renewable energy in India has become quite, I would say, common in terms of setting up plants. It's a no-brainer. It's not a very high technology to do the solar plants and wind plants. The tech part over here is the electrolyzer. So the electrolyzer technology is something which I'm so happy and proud to state that we are one of the first companies in India to be getting hold of this technology. And what we are doing is every element of the electrolyzer we are going to manufacture in India. Unlike most of the companies who are partly depending on imported stacks from Europe or elsewhere. So our factory in Hazira, we are going to manufacture every part of the electrolyzer, including I heard Madam speak about the BOP. The BOP is also, we are going to make sure that everything is indigenized, and the site program of the government, which is so beautifully crafted that the government is incentivizing that you more and more you do local value addition in terms of you go upwards of 60%, 70, 80%, 90% indigenization, you get more incentives from the government. So the indigenization coupled with a higher technology is going to get you super and excellent electrolyzers manufactured in India, and which will lead the way.
Okay, that's wonderful news. Mr. Ramnath Vaidyanathan, if you can sort of give us an idea. Here we have heard how in Japan, we have got hydrogen locomotives. We have, we talked about, we are talking about hydrogen fuel for cars in a big way. How far is India away from all this? We have been discussing this often, and what are the, what are the impediments on the way?
I think a lot of people already touched upon the problems are not going to be on the supply side in terms of renewable energy availability. And I think one of the aspects that we haven't really touched upon is the role of biomass and biofuels in really creating a lot of the green energy, because I actually see biomass is going to be the next big green energy boom in India, more so than solar, because solar, due to the land requirements, due to the other regulatory restrictions around it, has some sort of caps. We've sort of hit a plateau somewhere. But biomass, and this is something we are also exploring, we're looking at a bamboo biomass-based green hydrogen pilot, is something that could be a very, very big boost to the supply side of things. But coming to your question on the challenges and looking at, on the demand side of things, I think setting up the ecosystem for financing and the ecosystem for regulations is very, very critical. But in the absence of the two of these, you will see most of the sectors will struggle. I'll take two classic examples, one of which Sir already mentioned about solar in the last decade. It's a great success story. Would not have happened without the financing and the regulatory mechanisms coming together to really create that environment for the developers and the off-takers to flourish. EV is another great example. Now, the technology isn't the issue. The issue is how are we going to price it? How are we going to regulate it? How are we going to create these ecosystem of charging stations? So these questions have to be answered for hydrogen as well. It's not enough to look at just the technology side and the generator side of things and look at demand side of things. The interlinking and creating that entire ecosystem, creating platforms, for example, for purchase of green hydrogen, creating regulatory systems for monitoring and verification, that is going to be very, very critical. Without that, it's not going to be successful.
Okay, Ms. Chowdhury, creating the ecosystem, if you can just share your thoughts very quickly.
Yeah, so some of the points that I had mentioned earlier in terms of the infrastructure development, the standards and protocols that need to be set in place. But other parts of the ecosystem, I think important to see is the vision that government has set out of 5 million tons per annum. And the kind of jobs it's going to create, around 6 lakh jobs is what is estimated. So I think there's also that part of the ecosystem that needs to be focused upon in terms of creating the right kind of skill sets, building the capacity in this ecosystem as project development and production ramp up. One of the things that I really want to touch upon, and because I think the question you began with earlier was on environment, social governance, and I cannot but really reflect briefly on this, is the fact that while we start decarbonizing and moving towards this kind of energy transition, I think it's very, very important for us to also consider the complexities and the considerations that need to go with it as far as environment and social aspects are concerned. And I already mentioned, the emissions that might arise from the large-scale infrastructure development, and with the kind of prowess that India has, and looking at different innovations, I think that is something that definitely can be tackled if it's already factored in as companies start to look at project development, production, and various aspects of this ecosystem. But the second thing is, and because we're looking at hydrogen production largely from electrolysis, there's going to be a huge demand for water. Right, and one of the IEA studies estimates that to produce 1 kg of hydrogen, it requires 9 liters of water. Today, India produces about 6 million tons of grey hydrogen annually, and if we are going to produce that order of magnitude for green hydrogen, it'll require about 130 to 190 million tons of water. And given that India has water-scarce regions, how are we going to balance this demand? These are very important considerations, the availability of land and potential land use conflicts that might arise, the societal concerns out of that, the displacement. I think these are, because we talk about the cost of producing hydrogen, but we need to factor in the total environmental and social costs of producing it. And then, then it becomes a different economic viability aspect. And given that, and although I think the future is very bright for India, and the vision set out is great, I think if we start looking at how do we balance these considerations from now on, then we are going to make this energy transition just and sustainable. I think that's going to be very important to look at.
So, Mr. Mahuri, would you like to add to it? What has been Japan's concerns when it comes to these initiatives? How soon do you think you will find Indian companies exporting to your country? I mean, how close are you, or what's the kind of optimism you have regarding that happening?
Yes, thank you. I think that now the current Indian developers are waiting for the Japanese subsidy mechanism. And now this will be coming very soon. As I mentioned, the GX economy transition bond will be coming the next February or something. So once the subsidy scheme is set, I think the offtake discussion may be proceeding. But I also would like to say that, as Derek mentioned, the SITE program backed by a National Hydrogen Mission of India, we are closely focusing on the progress of the implementation of this framework as well. So both the demand side and the supply side subsidy makes the collaboration more faster and more viable, I think.
Okay, final word from you, Mr. Chatterjee. Your company has been very closely associated with a whole lot of projects. So what is your optimism and what are your major concerns?
I think maybe I'll just close by saying that in the next 10 years or the next decade for the hydrogen is the time to kind of really hunker down and prepare for infrastructure. I think that is going to really be the key thing, be it pipelines, be it export, import terminals. So I think that should be the key focus, be it, electrolyzers, ramp up generation, production of electrolyzers. And the other thing is, hydrogen, of course, is, it's going to be a big part of our energy transition and the net zero targets, but we should also realize that maybe hydrogen is not the answer for all sectors. So maybe, our first focus should be on the heavy industries, the refining, the chemicals, then look if it makes sense, for transport. So I think the current sectors itself give us a lot of potential for looking at green hydrogen.
Okay, great. We have just run out of time, and I think we have had a very comprehensive discussion on various aspects of this terminology called green hydrogen, which we keep hearing, and I think our experts here had been able to demystify that for us. Thank you so much, all the speakers.